The morning air at Buckingham Palace carried an unusual tension on October 21st, 2015. Staff members moved with practiced precision through the ornate corridors, their footsteps echoing against marble floors as they made final preparations for one of the most significant state visits in recent memory. President Xi Jinping of China was arriving for a 4-day official state visit to the United Kingdom, marking a crucial moment in Sino-British relations that had been months in the planning. Prince William stood in his private study, adjusting his navy blue suit while reviewing the carefully orchestrated schedule that lay before him. At 33, the Duke of Cambridge had already navigated countless diplomatic encounters, but this particular visit carried special weight. The relationship between Britain and China had experienced both triumphs and tensions over the decades, and every interaction during this state visit would be scrutinized by diplomats, media, and world leaders alike. The Chinese delegation had arrived at Heathrow Airport earlier that morning, where President Xi and his wife, Peng Liyuan, were greeted with full ceremonial honors. The red carpet stretched endlessly across the tarmac, flanked by honor guards whose polished boots gleamed in the autumn sunlight. As Air China's presidential aircraft came to a stop, the weight of protocol settled over everyone present like an invisible cloak. Queen Elizabeth II herself would be hosting the formal aspects of the visit, but Prince William had been tasked with several key interactions that would demonstrate the younger generation's commitment to building bridges with China. The prince understood that his role extended far beyond mere ceremonial duties. He was representing not just the crown, but Britain's future relationship with one of the world's most influential nations. The Chinese president's itinerary was packed with meetings at Downing Street, addresses to Parliament, and discussions about trade agreements worth billions of pounds. Yet Prince William knew that some of the most meaningful diplomatic progress often happened in the quieter moments, away from the cameras and formal negotiations. These were the instances where genuine connections could form between individuals who carried the hopes and expectations of their respective nations. As the morning progressed, Prince William made his way to the Chinese delegation's temporary headquarters in central London. The building buzzed with activity as security personnel, translators, and diplomatic staff coordinated the complex logistics of a state visit. The prince had requested a brief private meeting with President Xi, ostensibly to discuss upcoming cultural exchange programs, but privately hoping to establish a more personal rapport with the Chinese leader. The meeting room where they convened was decorated in neutral tones, with carefully selected artwork that honored both British and Chinese cultural traditions. A Ming Dynasty vase sat alongside a Wedgwood tea set, while silk tapestries depicting scenes from both nations' histories adorned the walls. Every detail had been considered and reconsidered to ensure cultural sensitivity and diplomatic appropriateness. When President Xi entered the room, Prince William was struck by the man's composed demeanor and thoughtful presence. The Chinese leader moved with quiet confidence, his expressions measured and deliberate. Years of diplomatic experience had taught both men to read subtle cues and navigate complex social dynamics. But there was something in President Xi's bearing that suggested genuine curiosity about his British hosts. Their initial conversation followed expected diplomatic channels. They discussed the upcoming trade negotiations, the importance of educational exchanges between their nations, and the mutual benefits of strengthened cultural ties. President Xi spoke thoughtfully about China's modernization efforts and his vision for his country's role in global affairs. Prince William shared his perspectives on youth engagement and the Crown's commitment to fostering international understanding. Yet beneath the formal pleasantries, both men seemed to sense an opportunity for something more authentic. Prince William had always believed that diplomacy worked best when it moved beyond scripted interactions to genuine human connection. He had seen his grandmother, the Queen, masterfully balance royal protocol with personal warmth throughout her decades of service, and he hoped to bring that same approach to his own diplomatic endeavors. As their scheduled meeting time drew to a close, Prince William made a decision that would surprise both the Chinese delegation and his own staff. He had been contemplating an idea that morning, something that might demonstrate British hospitality in a uniquely memorable way. The thought had seemed almost too bold when it first occurred to him, But as he observed President Xi's genuine interest in British culture and innovation, the idea began to seem not just appropriate, but necessary. The prince excused himself briefly to consult with his private secretary, who stood waiting just outside the meeting room. Their hushed conversation lasted only moments, but it set in motion a series of events that would become the subject of diplomatic folklore for years to come. When Prince William returned to the room, there was a subtle shift in his demeanor, a sense of excitement that he struggled to contain behind his royal composure. President Xi noticed the change immediately. Years of reading political situations and human behavior had made him acutely sensitive to such shifts in atmosphere. He studied the young prince's face with curiosity, wondering what might have prompted this sudden transformation. The formal portion of their meeting was complete, yet Prince William seemed reluctant to bring their interaction to an end. Outside the building, London continued its daily rhythm. Black taxis navigated narrow streets, while red double-decker buses carried tourists and commuters through the city center. The autumn leaves had begun their colorful transformation, painting the royal parks in shades of gold and crimson. It was a perfect October day in the British capital, with clear skies and mild temperatures that made outdoor activities particularly appealing. Prince William glanced toward the window, noting the beautiful weather, then turned back to President Xi with what could only be described as a mischievous smile. The Chinese leader had seen many expressions on the faces of world leaders during his political career, but this particular look was something entirely new in his diplomatic experience. There was something almost boyish about it, a sense of adventure that seemed incongruous with the formal setting of their meeting. The prince's security detail waited patiently in the corridor, accustomed to their charges' sometimes unpredictable decisions. They had learned over the years that Prince William possessed his mother's gift for connecting with people in unexpected ways, often leading to requests that required rapid adjustments to carefully planned schedules. Today would prove to be no exception to that pattern. As Prince William prepared to extend his unprecedented invitation, he reflected briefly on the potential implications of what he was about to propose. Royal protocol existed for important reasons, and state visits followed established procedures that had been refined over centuries of diplomatic practice. Yet sometimes the most meaningful gestures were those that transcended formal boundaries and spoke to shared human experiences. President Xi waited patiently, his curiosity clearly piqued by the prince's unusual behavior. The Chinese leader's own diplomatic experience had taught him to appreciate unexpected moments in formal proceedings. Some of his most successful international relationships had begun with seemingly minor interactions that revealed important character traits in his counterparts. He sensed that such a moment might be approaching. The room fell quiet except for the distant sounds of London traffic filtering through the windows. Both men understood that they stood at a crossroads of sorts, a moment where conventional diplomatic protocol might give way to something more spontaneous and genuine. The weight of their respective positions, the complexity of international relations, and the expectations of their nations all hung in the balance as Prince William prepared to make his remarkable proposal. Prince William took a breath and leaned forward slightly, his decision finally crystallized. What happened next would either be remembered as a diplomatic triumph or a breach of protocol so significant that it would require extensive explanation to both governments. The prince had weighed these possibilities and decided that the potential rewards of genuine human connection far outweighed the risks of unconventional diplomacy. The stage was set for an encounter that would transcend the usual boundaries of state visits, transforming a routine diplomatic meeting into something far more memorable and meaningful. Neither man yet realized that they were about to embark on an experience that would be discussed in diplomatic circles for years to come, becoming a symbol of how personal connections could bridge even the most significant cultural and political divides. "Your Excellency," Prince William began, his voice carrying a note of genuine enthusiasm that caught everyone in the room off guard. "I wonder if you might be interested in experiencing something quintessentially British before your schedule becomes too demanding." President Xi tilted his head slightly, his diplomatic training keeping his expression neutral while his eyes betrayed unmistakable curiosity about what the young prince might be proposing. The Chinese leader had attended hundreds of state visits throughout his career, following carefully choreographed itineraries that left little room for spontaneous activities. Every moment was typically planned, every interaction scripted, every photo opportunity calculated for maximum diplomatic impact. Yet something in Prince William's tone suggested that conventional protocol was about to be abandoned in favor of something far more intriguing. "I have an Aston Martin," Prince William continued, his smile broadening as he watched President Xi's reaction. "It's parked just outside, and I was wondering if you might like to take it for a drive. There's something quite special about experiencing British engineering firsthand, and I thought you might enjoy the chance to see a bit of London from behind the wheel of one of our finest motor cars." The silence that followed this invitation seemed to stretch for an eternity, though in reality it lasted only a few seconds. President Xi's security detail, who had been monitoring the conversation from their positions around the room, exchanged quick glances of surprise and concern. This was definitely not part of their carefully planned security protocols. Spontaneous driving expeditions with foreign heads of state were the kind of scenarios that gave protection services nightmares. President Xi himself appeared to be processing the unprecedented nature of the invitation. In his decades of political leadership, he had been offered many things by foreign dignitaries: rides in official motorcades, tours in armored vehicles, ceremonial drives in state carriages, but never had a head of state casually invited him to drive their personal vehicle through city streets. The informality of it was both refreshing and slightly overwhelming. Prince William's private secretary, who had been discreetly observing from the corner of the room, felt his carefully organized schedule beginning to unravel in real time. The prince was supposed to attend a lunch with Commonwealth representatives in less than 2 hours, followed by a meeting with environmental ministers and an evening reception for British business leaders. Adding an impromptu driving excursion to this timeline would require some creative rearrangement of royal obligations. Yet as the private secretary watched President Xi's face, he began to understand why Prince William had made such an unusual offer. The Chinese leader's expression had transformed from diplomatic politeness to genuine intrigue. For perhaps the first time since arriving in Britain, President Xi appeared to be encountering something completely unexpected, something that engaged his personal curiosity rather than his official responsibilities. "This is quite an unusual invitation," President Xi replied slowly, his English precise despite the complexity of the situation he was navigating. "In China, we have a saying about unexpected opportunities. They often provide the most valuable lessons. I must admit, your offer is unlike anything I have experienced during a state visit." His tone suggested that this uniqueness was more appealing than concerning. Prince William sensed the opening and pressed forward with enthusiasm that was becoming increasingly difficult to contain. "The car is actually quite special. It's an Aston Martin DB9, British engineering at its finest. James Bond drives Aston Martins, as you probably know, and there's something uniquely British about the experience of driving one through London. I thought it might give you a different perspective on our country, one that goes beyond the usual diplomatic venues and formal receptions." The mention of James Bond brought a rare smile to President Xi's face. The Chinese leader was well aware of the cultural significance of the British secret agent, and the connection between Aston Martin and this iconic fictional character was not lost on him. The idea of experiencing, even briefly, something connected to such a quintessentially British cultural phenomenon held obvious appeal. Outside the building, the autumn afternoon continued to unfold beautifully. The London sky had cleared completely, revealing the kind of crisp blue that made October days in England particularly memorable. Traffic moved at a reasonable pace through the city center, and the weather conditions were ideal for an unexpected driving adventure. It seemed as though the universe itself was conspiring to make Prince William's spontaneous invitation more appealing. President Xi's lead security advisor approached and whispered something in Mandarin, obviously expressing concerns about the security implications of such an unplanned excursion. The advisor's body language suggested significant reservations about deviating from established protocols, particularly involving vehicles that had not been thoroughly inspected by security teams. Protection details for world leaders typically required extensive advance preparation for any transportation arrangements. Prince William watched this exchange with understanding, recognizing the legitimate security concerns that his invitation had raised. "Of course," he interjected diplomatically, "my security team would coordinate with yours to ensure everything is handled appropriately. We could take a route through some of London's quieter areas, perhaps through one of the royal parks. The car has been thoroughly maintained, and my protection officers are quite familiar with secure driving routes throughout the city." The prince's willingness to address security concerns directly seemed to ease some of the tension in the room. His protection detail nodded their agreement, indicating that they could indeed accommodate such a request with proper coordination. They had, after all, dealt with various unconventional situations during their years of service with the young royal, and they possessed the flexibility to adapt to his sometimes spontaneous diplomatic initiatives. President Xi considered the offer carefully, weighing the diplomatic implications against his genuine personal interest in the experience. State visits were carefully orchestrated affairs where every moment served specific political purposes, but occasionally opportunities arose for more human connections that could prove equally valuable in building international relationships. This seemed to be one of those rare moments. The Chinese leader's wife, Peng Liyuan, had been scheduled to visit a local school during this time period, meaning that President Xi's afternoon schedule had some flexibility that could accommodate an unexpected excursion. His diplomatic team could rearrange the timing of his next formal meeting without causing significant disruption to the overall visit itinerary. "Your Highness," President Xi said finally, his decision clearly made, "I would be honored to accept your invitation. It is not often that one has the opportunity to experience British automotive craftsmanship firsthand, particularly in such distinguished company. I believe this could provide valuable insights into British culture that might not be available through more conventional diplomatic interactions." The relief and excitement in Prince William's expression was unmistakable. His gamble on spontaneous diplomacy was paying off in ways that would likely exceed anything achievable through formal meetings and scripted conversations. "Excellent," he responded with genuine enthusiasm. "I think you'll find it quite an experience. London looks rather different from the driver's seat of an Aston Martin than it does from the back of an official motorcade." As both security teams began rapidly coordinating the logistics of this unexpected excursion, Prince William felt a surge of satisfaction at having broken through the formal barriers that often prevented meaningful personal connections during state visits. His instinct that President Xi would appreciate an authentic British experience seemed to have been correct, and he was eager to see how the Chinese leader would respond to the freedom and power of driving a high-performance British sports car. The room buzzed with activity as protection officers from both nations worked together to plan a secure route through London that would provide an interesting drive while maintaining appropriate security protocols. Radio communications crackled as advance teams began positioning themselves along potential routes, and vehicle inspections commenced to ensure the Aston Martin met security standards for transporting a foreign head of state. President Xi watched these preparations with evident anticipation. For a man accustomed to being driven everywhere in heavily armored official vehicles, the prospect of actually controlling a car himself, particularly such a prestigious British motor car, represented a unique and appealing break from routine. The diplomatic value of the gesture was clear, but his personal excitement about the experience was becoming equally important. Prince William moved to the window, gesturing toward the street below, where his midnight blue Aston Martin DB9 sat gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. The car's sleek lines and powerful stance made it immediately recognizable as something special, even among the luxury vehicles that regularly traveled through this part of London. "There she is," he said with obvious pride in the British engineering marvel that would soon carry both men through the streets of the capital. The stage was set for an unprecedented diplomatic adventure that would take both leaders far beyond the confines of traditional state visit protocol. What began as a routine meeting was about to transform into an experience that would be remembered and discussed in diplomatic circles for years to come, proving that sometimes the most meaningful international relations happen when formal barriers are set aside in favor of genuine human connection. 20 minutes later, the complex choreography of international security had transformed the quiet London street into a carefully controlled zone of diplomatic activity. Protection officers from both the British Royal Security Team and The Chinese Presidential Guard had positioned themselves strategically around Prince William's Aston Martin DB9, their professional efficiency evident in every movement. The midnight blue sports car sat like a jewel in the center of their attention, its polished surface reflecting the afternoon sunlight in ways that emphasized its sleek, powerful design. President Xi emerged from the building with Prince William at his side, both men walking with the easy confidence of individuals accustomed to being the center of attention. Yet there was something different about this moment compared to the typical formal processions of state visits. The Chinese leader's usual measured pace had quickened slightly, betraying an eagerness that was rarely visible during his official duties. Prince William, meanwhile, practically radiated excitement at the success of his unconventional diplomatic gambit. The Aston Martin DB9 was indeed a spectacular example of British automotive engineering. Its flowing lines suggested both elegance and power, while the distinctive grille and bonnet vents marked it unmistakably as an Aston Martin. The car represented decades of British motorsport heritage and craftsmanship, embodying the kind of engineering excellence that had made British sports cars legendary around the world. For President Xi, who had spent much of his life being transported in heavy, armored official vehicles, the prospect of driving something so beautifully designed and mechanically sophisticated was genuinely thrilling. Prince William walked around the vehicle, pointing out various design elements that he particularly appreciated. The V12 engine produces about 470 horsepower, he explained with the enthusiasm of a true automobile enthusiast. It's quite different from anything you'll experience in an official motorcade. Aston Martin has been making cars like this for nearly a century, and each one represents the absolute pinnacle of British engineering and craftsmanship. President Xi nodded appreciatively as he examined the car's exterior details. His trained eye took in the precision of the bodywork, the quality of the paint finish, and the elegant integration of functional elements like air intakes and aerodynamic features. The attention to detail is remarkable, he observed, running his hand lightly along the car's smooth flank. In China, we are working to develop our own automotive industry, but we have great respect for the heritage and expertise that goes into vehicles like this. The security briefing that followed was necessarily brief, but comprehensive. Both protection teams had worked together to establish a route that would provide an interesting driving experience while maintaining appropriate security protocols. They would travel through Hyde Park, past some of London's most iconic landmarks, and through several neighborhoods that would give President Xi a genuine sense of the British capital beyond its political centers. Prince William's personal protection officer, a veteran of countless royal excursions, approached the prince with the easy familiarity of someone who had learned to adapt to his charge's sometimes unconventional approach to royal duties. Your Royal Highness, we've established a secure route that should provide an excellent tour of the city. The advance team is already in position, and will have discreet coverage throughout the journey. Weather conditions are ideal, and traffic is lighter than usual for this time of day. The officer then turned to President Xi with professional respect. Your Excellency, if you have any questions about the vehicle's controls or would prefer any specific adjustments to the route, we can certainly accommodate those requests. His Royal Highness is an experienced driver, but if you would prefer to familiarize yourself with the car's systems before departing, we can arrange for a brief orientation. President Xi smiled at the thoroughness of the British security preparations. I appreciate your professionalism, but I believe the best way to understand a car like this is to experience it directly. I have some familiarity with high-performance vehicles, though I admit it has been some time since I had the opportunity to drive one personally. The Chinese leader's confidence suggested that he was more than capable of handling the powerful Aston Martin, despite the diplomatic protocols that usually kept him safely ensconced in the passenger compartments of official vehicles. Prince William moved to the passenger side of the Aston Martin, gesturing for President Xi to take the driver's seat. The honor is entirely yours, Your Excellency. I think you'll find that driving through London provides a completely different perspective on the city than what you've seen from official motorcades. There's something about being in control of the vehicle yourself that changes how you experience everything around you. As President Xi approached the driver's door, one of his security advisors stepped forward with a final concern. Speaking quietly in Mandarin, The advisor obviously wanted to confirm that his principal was comfortable with the unconventional nature of this diplomatic activity. The Chinese leader listened patiently, then responded with what appeared to be gentle reassurance before switching back to English for the benefit of their British hosts. My advisor is naturally concerned about the departure from normal protocols, President Xi explained with a slight smile. However, I have reminded him that some of the most valuable diplomatic experiences occur when we step outside our usual boundaries. This invitation represents exactly the kind of cultural exchange that makes state visits meaningful beyond their formal objectives. The moment when President Xi settled into the driver's seat of the Aston Martin was remarkable for its symbolic significance. Here was the leader of the world's most populous nation, a man who wielded enormous political and economic influence, taking control of a machine that represented centuries of British engineering tradition and cultural identity. The image captured something essential about international relations at their best: the willingness of world leaders to trust each other and share experiences that transcended political boundaries. Prince William climbed into the passenger seat, immediately struck by how different the car felt from this angle compared to his usual driving position. The Aston Martin's interior was a masterpiece of luxury craftsmanship, with hand-stitched leather surfaces, polished wood trim, and precisely machined metal controls that spoke to the car's racing heritage. Every element had been designed not just for functionality, but for the sensory pleasure of the driving experience. The engine start button is just there, Prince William indicated, pointing to the distinctive red button that would bring the V12 to life. Once you press it, you'll understand why Aston Martin has such a legendary reputation. The sound alone is quite extraordinary. His excitement about sharing this experience with such a distinguished guest was evident in every word. President Xi positioned his hands on the steering wheel, familiarizing himself with the car's controls and adjusting the seat and mirrors to his preferences. The ritual of preparing to drive was universal, regardless of whether the vehicle was a modest family car or a £250,000 British sports car. Yet there was something almost meditative about the process, a moment of calm before the excitement of actually experiencing the machine's capabilities. The security caravan had organized itself efficiently around them, with discreet escort vehicles positioned to provide protection without overwhelming the experience of driving through London. The lead vehicle would maintain radio contact with President Xi's protection team, while follow cars would ensure that the route remained secure throughout their journey. It was a delicate balance between maintaining security and preserving the spontaneous nature of Prince William's invitation. As President Xi reached toward the engine start button, both men understood that they were about to embark on something unprecedented in the annals of international diplomacy. State visits typically followed carefully scripted patterns designed to showcase formal relationships between nations. This impromptu driving excursion represented something far more personal. Two individuals from vastly different cultures sharing a moment of genuine human connection through their appreciation for exceptional engineering and craftsmanship. The afternoon sun streamed through the Aston Martin's windows, casting intricate patterns of light and shadow across the car's luxurious interior. London stretched out before them, a city that had witnessed centuries of international diplomacy and cultural exchange. Today, it would host a new kind of diplomatic encounter, one measured not in signed agreements or formal declarations, but in a shared experience of two world leaders discovering common ground through their mutual appreciation for the simple pleasure of driving a beautiful car through one of the world's great capitals. President Xi's finger hovered over the start button for just a moment, savoring the anticipation of what was to come. Prince William watched with evident satisfaction, knowing that his unconventional invitation was about to create the kind of authentic diplomatic moment that would be remembered and discussed long after the formal meetings and ceremonial events of the state visit had faded from memory. The moment President Xi pressed the start button, the Aston Martin's V12 engine awakened with a deep, resonant growl that seemed to reverberate through the very bones of both occupants. The sound was unlike anything from the heavily insulated official vehicles that typically transported world leaders. This was raw, mechanical poetry, the voice of British engineering at its most eloquent. President Xi's eyes widened slightly at the immediate sensory impact, while Prince William grinned with the satisfaction of someone sharing a treasured experience with an appreciative audience. Magnificent. President, Xi murmured in English, his hands gripping the steering wheel as he felt the subtle vibrations of the powerful engine transmitted through the car's structure. The Chinese leader had experienced many impressive machines throughout his life, from state-of-the-art aircraft to cutting-edge industrial equipment. But there was something uniquely intimate about the connection between driver and machine that the Aston Martin provided. Prince William gestured toward the road ahead, where their security escort had cleared a path through the London traffic. "Shall we see what London looks like from this perspective?" he suggested, his voice carrying genuine excitement about the journey they were about to undertake together. The conventional diplomatic schedule had been temporarily set aside in favor of something far more authentic and memorable. As President Xi engaged the transmission and began to move forward, the Aston Martin responded with the kind of immediate, precise feedback that distinguished truly exceptional sports cars from mere luxury transportation. The steering was direct and communicative, the throttle response instantaneous, and the overall sense of connection between driver and machine was remarkable. For someone accustomed to being insulated from the driving experience, this level of mechanical engagement was revelatory. Their route took them initially through some of London's quieter diplomatic areas, where wide streets and mature trees provided an elegant backdrop for their unconventional journey. The security team maintained discreet positions around them, professional in their attention to protection while allowing the two leaders to experience genuine freedom of movement. Radio communications crackled quietly as the escort vehicles coordinated their movements, ensuring that the route remained clear while preserving the spontaneous nature of the experience. "The handling is quite remarkable," President Xi observed as he navigated a gentle curve, feeling how the Aston Martin's sophisticated suspension system kept the car perfectly balanced despite its considerable power. There is a directness to the controls that speaks to the engineering philosophy behind the vehicle. Everything feels purposeful, connected. His appreciation for the car's technical excellence was evident in his careful attention to every aspect of its behavior. Prince William nodded enthusiastically. "That's exactly what makes Aston Martin special. British engineering has always emphasized the relationship between driver and machine. It's not just transportation. It's a form of communication between human intention and mechanical capability." The prince's words reflected his genuine passion for automotive excellence, but also his understanding of how shared enthusiasms could build bridges between individuals from different cultures. As they entered Hyde Park, the scenery around them transformed into the kind of pastoral beauty that made London unique among world capitals. Ancient trees lined the roadway, their autumn foliage creating a tunnel of gold and amber that filtered the afternoon sunlight into shifting patterns of light and shadow. The park's tranquil atmosphere provided a perfect contrast to the power and sophistication of the machine they were driving, creating a uniquely British juxtaposition of natural beauty and human engineering excellence. President Xi slowed the car to better appreciate their surroundings, demonstrating the kind of thoughtful attention to environment and context that had characterized his approach to leadership. "This is quite different from the formal tour routes we typically experience during state visits," he remarked, watching as ordinary Londoners walked their dogs, jogged along the pathways, and enjoyed the beautiful autumn afternoon. "There is something valuable about seeing a city through the eyes of its everyday residents rather than just its political institutions." The observation struck Prince William as particularly insightful. "That's exactly why I thought you might enjoy this experience," he replied. "London is a city of neighborhoods and communities, not just government buildings and ceremonial venues. The people we're seeing here, going about their daily lives, they're the real Britain in many ways. They're the ones who will ultimately benefit from the relationships we build between our nations." As they continued through the park, both men began to relax into a more natural conversation than had been possible during their formal diplomatic meeting. The shared experience of driving, combined with the beautiful surroundings and the absence of note-taking diplomats and protocol officers, created an atmosphere conducive to genuine personal exchange. They discussed their respective experiences with driving, their appreciation for engineering excellence, and their observations about how different perspectives could enhance understanding between cultures. President Xi proved to be a skilled and confident driver, handling the Aston Martin's considerable power with evident expertise while maintaining perfect control in all situations. His techniques suggested someone who had significant experience with high-performance vehicles, though the demands of his political position rarely allowed for such personal indulgences. In my younger years, I had more opportunities to drive, he admitted with a slight smile. Political leadership tends to place one permanently in the passenger seat, both literally and sometimes figuratively. The comment drew a laugh from Prince William, who understood exactly what the Chinese leader meant. The irony of leadership positions is that they often require giving up many of the simple pleasures that make life enjoyable, he agreed. Sometimes the most valuable diplomatic interactions happen when we remember that we're individuals first and political figures second. The observation seemed to crystallize what both men were experiencing during their unconventional afternoon together. As they approached the park's exit, President Xi demonstrated the Aston Martin's acceleration capabilities, pressing the throttle more firmly and experiencing the immediate surge of power that made the British sports car legendary. The engine's response was instantaneous and thrilling, pushing both occupants back into their seats as the speedometer climbed rapidly through the gears. The sensation was exhilarating while remaining completely controlled, a testament to both the car's engineering excellence and the driver's skill. Extraordinary, President Xi breathed as he moderated their speed back to more sedate levels appropriate for city driving. The power delivery is remarkably linear and predictable. There is no sense that the machine is fighting against your intentions. Everything feels harmonious and purposeful. His technical appreciation for the vehicle's capabilities was matched by obvious enjoyment of the driving experience itself. Their route now took them through some of London's most historic neighborhoods, where centuries-old architecture created a backdrop that seemed to tell the story of British civilization. Georgian terraces gave way to Victorian squares, while modern developments demonstrated how the city continued to evolve while respecting its heritage. For President Xi, accustomed to China's rapid urban transformation, London's approach to balancing preservation with progress offered interesting insights into different models of development. Prince William pointed out various landmarks and neighborhoods, sharing stories about their historical significance and contemporary relevance. The informal nature of their mobile tour allowed for the kind of detailed cultural exchange that would have been impossible during a traditional motorcade procession. They discussed architecture, urban planning, the evolution of cities, and the ways that physical environments reflected the values and priorities of their inhabitants. The security team continued to maintain their discreet presence around them, managing traffic and ensuring clear routes while allowing the two leaders to experience genuine freedom of movement. The professionalism of both protection details was evident in their ability to adapt to this unscripted situation while maintaining appropriate security protocols. Their coordination demonstrated the kind of international cooperation that made such spontaneous diplomatic gestures possible. As their journey continued through the heart of London, both men seemed to recognize that they were participating in something unprecedented and valuable. The formal meetings and ceremonial events of the state visit would serve important diplomatic functions, but this shared experience of exploring London together was creating a different kind of understanding between them. Personal connections formed through genuine shared interests often proved more durable than agreements reached through purely political negotiations. As their remarkable journey through London neared its conclusion, President Xi guided the Aston Martin through the final stages of their route with the confidence of someone who had completely mastered the vehicle's sophisticated systems. The afternoon sun had begun its descent toward the horizon, casting longer shadows across the city and bathing everything in the golden light that made autumn evenings in London particularly magical. Both men seemed reluctant for this unprecedented diplomatic interlude to end, understanding that they had shared something genuinely special that transcended the usual boundaries of international relations. Their conversation during these final miles had evolved from technical discussions about automotive engineering to broader reflections on leadership, responsibility, and the challenges of representing entire nations while maintaining personal authenticity. President Xi had shared insights about the balance between individual desires and collective obligations that resonated deeply with Prince William's own experiences of royal duty. The Chinese leader's thoughtful approach to these complex issues had impressed the prince, who found himself gaining new respect for the philosophical dimensions of his guest's leadership style. "This has been quite extraordinary," President Xi reflected as he navigated the final turns of their route, his hands steady on the steering wheel despite the obvious emotional significance of the moment. "In all my years of diplomatic engagements and state visits, I have never experienced anything quite like this. There is something about sharing a beautiful machine and exploring a historic city together that creates understanding in ways that formal meetings simply cannot achieve." Prince William nodded enthusiastically, recognizing that a spontaneous invitation had achieved exactly what he had hoped for when he first proposed this unconventional excursion. "I believe some of the most important diplomacy happens when we step away from scripts and protocols and simply interact as human beings who share common interests and values," he replied. "Today has demonstrated that regardless of our different backgrounds and responsibilities, we can find genuine connection through shared appreciation for excellence, whether in engineering, culture, or the simple pleasure of experiencing something beautiful together." As they approached their destination, the security teams began the complex process of transitioning back to formal protocols while preserving the relaxed atmosphere that had characterized their afternoon together. Radio communications increased as protection officers coordinated the conclusion of their unscripted journey, ensuring that the return to official duties would occur smoothly despite the spontaneous nature of their excursion. President Xi brought the Aston Martin to a gentle stop in front of the building where their afternoon had begun, executing the parking maneuver with the kind of precision that reflected his careful attention to every aspect of the driving experience. The engine's powerful rumble settled into a contented idle, as if the machine itself was reluctant to see the adventure end. Both men sat quietly for a moment, savoring the conclusion of their unprecedented diplomatic journey. "Your Excellency," Prince William said as they prepared to return to their official obligations, "I hope this experience has provided some insights into British culture that might not have been available through more conventional diplomatic channels. The combination of engineering excellence, respect for heritage, and willingness to embrace spontaneous opportunities represents much of what we value as a nation." President Xi turned to face the prince directly, his expression serious but warm. "Your Royal Highness, this invitation and the experience we have shared this afternoon represent diplomacy at its finest. You have shown me not just British automotive craftsmanship, but British hospitality, creativity, and genuine friendship. These are gifts that cannot be negotiated in formal meetings or captured in written agreements. Yet they may prove more valuable than any trade deal or political understanding we might reach through conventional channels." The Chinese leader paused thoughtfully before continuing. "In my country, we have ancient wisdom about the importance of personal relationships in all significant endeavors. Today, you have demonstrated that this wisdom applies equally to international relations. The trust and understanding we have built during this drive will inform all of our future interactions, creating a foundation of personal connection that will benefit both our nations for years to come." As they prepared to exit the vehicle, both men understood that they had participated in something that would be remembered and discussed in diplomatic circles for decades to come. The story of Prince William offering the Chinese president the opportunity to drive his personal Aston Martin through London would become part of diplomatic folklore, an example of how unconventional approaches could achieve results that traditional protocols might never accomplish. The security teams moved with practiced efficiency to facilitate their exit from a vehicle while maintaining appropriate protection protocols. Photographers who had been positioned discreetly at various points along their route had captured images of this historic moment. Though both leaders understood that the true significance of their afternoon together could not be fully conveyed through pictures alone, the genuine connection they had forged would have lasting impact far beyond any media coverage. President Xi stepped out of the driver's seat with obvious reluctance, taking a final moment to appreciate the Aston Martin's elegant design before handing the keys back to Prince William. "Thank you for trusting me with such a magnificent machine," he said with genuine gratitude. "The experience of driving it through your beautiful city has been truly memorable. I shall treasure this afternoon among my most valued diplomatic experiences." Prince William accepted the keys with equal emotion, understanding that they represented far more than simple automotive access. They symbolized the trust, friendship, and mutual respect that had developed during their unconventional journey together. "The pleasure has been entirely mine, Your Excellency. Sharing something I personally value with someone who can truly appreciate its significance has been deeply rewarding." As they prepared to return to their respective official obligations, both men seemed to recognize that their afternoon together had established a new standard for diplomatic engagement. The formal meetings, ceremonial events, and negotiated agreements of the state visit would proceed according to established protocols, but they would now be informed by the personal understanding and genuine friendship that had developed during their drive through London. Word of their extraordinary afternoon spread quickly through diplomatic channels, generating admiration for both leaders' willingness to transcend conventional boundaries in pursuit of authentic connection. Senior diplomats from both nations recognized that Prince William's spontaneous invitation and President Xi's gracious acceptance had achieved something valuable that months of formal negotiations might never have accomplished. The Aston Martin sat quietly in the afternoon light, its polished surface reflecting the golden autumn sun as both leaders prepared to resume their official duties. The vehicle had served as more than mere transportation. It had become a catalyst for the kind of genuine human connection that makes international relations meaningful beyond their purely political dimensions. In the years that followed, both Prince William and President Xi would refer to this afternoon as a defining moment in their personal relationship and in the broader diplomatic ties between their nations. The story of their spontaneous drive through London became a symbol of how authentic friendship between world leaders could transcend political differences and cultural boundaries, creating understanding that benefited millions of people in both countries. The golden afternoon light gradually gave way to evening as London continued its eternal rhythm around them. But the impact of their unprecedented diplomatic adventure would endure far beyond this perfect autumn day. They had proven that sometimes the most important international relations happen not in conference rooms or formal ceremonies, but in the simple shared appreciation of excellence, beauty, and the joy of two individuals discovering common ground despite their vastly different worlds. As they walked back into the building where their remarkable journey had begun, both men carried with them the satisfaction of having created something genuinely new in the annals of international diplomacy. Their afternoon drive through London in a British sports car would be remembered not just as an unusual footnote to a state visit, but as an example of how personal connection and authentic friendship could transform the entire character of relations between nations. The Aston Martin had provided the vehicle, but their shared willingness to embrace spontaneity and genuine human connection had supplied the true power that would drive their relationship forward for years to come.